So overtime, and we're going to do more calculations again on Thursday with regard to overtime. So overtime is all hours worked over 40 hours during a work week. And for those employees who are not exempt from the overtime provisions of the FLSA, they are entitled to premium pay for hours worked over 40 hours in a week. Now, states can have more generous overtime provisions. I don't know if any of them do, but they can't have less generous overtime provisions. So the going rate is 1.5 times whatever the regular rate is. Again, minimum wage applies. So you can't have a wage that's lower than whatever that minimum wage is. So what exactly is a week? We're talking about over 40 hours in a week. What's our definition of a week? Well, it's any consecutive 168-hour period. So oftentimes it starts midnight, excuse me, midnight, actually this is wrong, should be midnight, they're missing a minute. 12 a.m. Saturday to 11:59 p.m. Sunday, or 12 a.m. Sunday, and then ending at 11:59 p.m. on Saturday. So that's 168 consecutive hours. So what you do is you add up all the hours worked during that 168-hour period, and that is your work week. If you work more than 40 hours during that week, then you are working overtime and are entitled to overtime pay. Again, if a state's overtime rule is more generous, then you follow the state rule. So what does that mean? Overtime for minimum wage comes to $10.88 an hour. So again, that's all hours over 40. $10 an hour, $15 an hour for overtime. So this is our regular rate, this is our overtime rate. 20, I don't have to keep doing this, but I will. $30 an hour for overtime. So that means if somebody worked 42 hours and they make $20 an hour, for the first 40 hours, they're going to make $800. For the next 2 hours, they're going to make $30 for a total of $860 during that work week. Now we'll talk about this on Thursday as well. There are a couple of different ways to calculate this overtime premium. Sometimes we multiply it by 1.5, sometimes we multiply it by 0.5, which is kind of an interesting way of doing it, but you'll find that there are some calculations that we do when we start converting individuals who are salaried into hourly rates and then calculating overtime. There's certain calculations that we do where we need to do that other method that it's called the overtime premium method. We'll go into more detail on Thursday about that, but it can get a little bit more complicated than just multiplying an hourly rate by 1.5. I will let you know that. Let's see. So if an hourly rate employee works, say they work in 2-week period, like they get paid over 2 weeks or a longer period, like twice a month or monthly, the employer can give compensatory time during the same pay period. So if I worked 41 hours this week, my employer could give me 1.5 hours off next week, as long as I'm getting paid, it's within the same pay period. So instead of paying me for the overtime, I can get time and a half off in the next week. But like I said, it has to be in the same pay period. There are a couple of exceptions to that. I'm going to come back to this. So if an individual works for a state or any political subdivision, so a county, city, that sort of thing, they can accumulate comp time. It's only those employees who work for these governmental units that can accumulate comp time. If you are in public safety, you can accumulate up to 480 hours of comp time. That means it doesn't have to be in the same pay period. You can bank it for the future. If they're not in public safety, they can accumulate up to 240 hours. But private industry individuals, nonprofit, those who work for nonprofits, they cannot accumulate that comp time. The comp time, if they're going to be given 1.5 hours off for every hour of overtime, it has to be in the same pay period. Okay, for private pay individuals, or private industry individuals or nonprofits. Let's see. There's special rules as well for hospital employees, because as we know, hospital employees oftentimes work strange shifts. You know, they'll work 12-hour shifts, 16-hour shifts, that sort of thing. They'll maybe work, 3 or 4 12-hour shifts, and then they'll get 3 days or 4 days off. So their weeks are kind of all over the place, right? So they have some special rules. They can get overtime for over 80 hours in a 14-day period, or over 8 hours in a work day, whichever one gives them the most generous pay. So whichever one is great for overtime. So that's really the one I wanted to talk to you about. That you can also be mandated to work overtime. Your employer can make you work overtime, and they can fire you if you refuse. But they have to pay you. They have to pay you for that overtime, but there is no law that prevents them from mandating overtime. There's no limit on the number of hours they can make you work. They just have to pay you for it, right? And comp time. All right. Since we got 3 minutes left, that's probably all